Shall we begin?
The one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you.
Greetings, Sentients! Well, episode 4 of the current season of Game of Thrones is pretty much episode 2 redone. If you're a casual fan of either fantasy or just TV in general, most of this episode probably wasn't all that entertaining. If you're a die-hard Game of Thrones fan, however, there is a lot of character interaction, which could be quite interesting in developing the various storylines. Although, a lot of people do feel that the various characters actually kind of acted somewhat out of character quite a bit. It's one of those situations that you'll find in TV, books, or movies where established characters will actually behave sometimes in at least slightly odd ways that are basically designed to move the plot forward, even if it's actually, if you will, unrealistic. It's funny as some people might find referring to a fictional character as unrealistic, but assuming that your show is, grounded in realism and that characters have been portrayed in behaving in, a consistent and logical manner for whatever their personalities, background, idiosyncrasies, goals, and plans are, then viewers expect them to behave in a certain way that, that they have become accustomed to. But sometimes characters will not behave in that way in order to drive the plot forward. It's basically a combination of either bad writing or just running out of time and trying to condense so much stuff. You need something to happen and you don't care how it happens. And that's part of the problem actually with this season apparently being a short 6 episodes. They're long episodes, sure, but that's not a lot of time to tell a complicated story. Regardless, the first part of the episode is basically just character conflicts. You have Jon Snow and Daenerys' relationship, them finding out that they are in fact related, aunt and nephew, as well as some more conflicts between Daenerys and Sansa, which does seem to be coming to a bit of a head here. Jon heads off the worst of it, but definitely Sansa is chafing at the yoke. She is not at all pleased to have to follow Daenerys. Even though, so far, Daenerys hasn't actually done anything. The most egregious that she's done is insist that everyone immediately march south without resting after the battle, which they've had at least one day of rest to handle all the burials and the feasting that they had, but still, that's not a lot of time after such a vicious battle. And yes, we do have an excellent example of bad writing here, absolutely. Regardless of how you feel about the characters, quite clearly in the last episode, the Dothraki were wiped out. Some people feel like the Unsullied were wiped out too, but actually, if you watch the episode, most of the Unsullied do get into the castle. It's only really a small portion, maybe a fourth of them at most, that actually end up being trapped outside the wall of the wooden spikes that they set on fire, that is. Now afterwards, of course, the undead flooded into the castle, and we were not shown any scenes of, indoors inside the castle where the undead weren't inside. No pocket of survivors, no one fortifying or barricading a wall or a door, nothing. So certainly the implication was that they were everywhere and killing everyone. But we didn't actually see them wipe out the rest of the Unsullied. Regardless, the episode has retconned that into being that only half the Dothraki are dead, the other half are alive, despite that they were all wiped out, beyond a few stragglers, of course, and that half the Unsullied were wiped out, again, despite the fact that actually more than half of the Unsullied survived, assuming they were holed up in a castle somewhere. So definitely some retconning going there. Now, Ghost, Jon's dog, did survive, and Jon immediately gives him to Torment, I believe his name is, whatever, the wildling leader, or closest equivalent they have. The dire wolves are all CGI effects, so this is probably done to simply not have to CGI the wolf anymore. A lot of people were quite upset because, again, it seemed out of character for Jon Snow to simply give away his dog like that. Regardless, again, I really can't remember to keep their names straight, but the dragon that Jon was riding, despite the fact that we didn't see it as soon as he was unhorsed, if you will, from it, has indeed survived. It's badly hurt, but still alive. So Daenerys has two dragons. The undead dragon, of course, being dead now. Baratheon's illegitimate child has been actually named Lord Baratheon, reestablishing his great house by Daenerys. Definitely a political move on her part. And the Baratheons are the ones that, of course, unthroned the Targaryens. So this does actually show a measure of her offering out an olive branch. It shows to everyone she's not carrying old grudges. She's not going to be, revenge seeking. He helped her because he was the one who made all the dragon glass weapons, and so she's returning that. It's all good between them. So he's now Lord of the Storm Reach, or Stormlands, or whatever that region is called. We don't know who's currently in charge of it. Presumably the Lannisters probably put somebody in charge, but we just don't talk about that. Gendrys, or whatever his name is, does actually propose to Arya Stark to make her Lady Baratheon. But predictably, she turns him down because she's not interested in being a lady. She wants to go out and have adventure, despite you would think she's probably had enough of that by now. True, that was her character in the beginning, but considering everything she went through in Braavos, and now with the undead, you'd think maybe she'd be more open to settling down and maybe occasionally going out for an adventure. But regardless, she eventually leaves the castle with the Hound as they all head south. Now, I suppose we need to talk about Jaime and Brienne of Tarth. They actually get together in this episode, and again, it's that thing, very out of character with it. This feels totally to be a fan service moment. Now, I don't particularly care if they get together or not, but I'm not interested if they get together or not. So devoting so much screen time to it really dragged the first part of this episode out. And like I said, it's just not realistic to either of their characters. They're not interested in each other in that way. Or at least they haven't been portrayed as being interested. It's totally a fan thing to ship, quote unquote, these characters. But whatever. Like I said, I don't feel that it is a bad thing. It's just kind of boring. Like I said, they all head south, and the main bulk of the army travels over land. However, Daenerys' forces travel over sea. And it sounded like they were going back to Dragonstone, I believe, that keep on the island. It's actually a very old House Targaryen fortress. But instead, they seem to have gone straight to King's Landing instead, with the idea that they were going to basically blockade the sea. It's not a bad strategy. Overall, they plan to simply starve the city into submission, which is the usual strategy if you don't want to destroy what you're hoping to capture. However, the Greyjoys, of course, have a large fleet. What's his name? Huron Greyjoy, who's allied with the Queen and banging her currently. And they were going to use the dragons to burn any ships to prevent them from supplying the castle. However, thanks to the giant Kraken-styled crossbows, the fleet instead somehow manages to ambush Daenerys and kills one of her dragons. One of the two big events here at the end of the episode. How exactly they managed to pull this off, I don't know if Daenerys is just supposed to be really cocky now, but somehow Greyjoy has his fleet hidden between two, not even mountains, but really hills in the sort of bay area. And he's got these wonderfully black gold trimmed ships with the sort of Kraken, giant octopus squid design on them, black sails. Considering how he supposedly built this fleet in a hurry last season, they spent quite a lot of time retrofitting and fancying these ships up. And they look beautiful, don't get me wrong. But somehow he's hidden them in this bay, which, again, if you are just sailing along, I would buy that you really wouldn't be able to see those ships. But Daenerys is flying. She doesn't notice. She actually has a vantage point to tell, and they don't have any scout ships. No one going ahead. I mean, again, unless she's just really cocky now and thinks she's just going to sweep the sea before her, it seems odd if one's heading to King's Landing like this and there's no kind of recon whatsoever. Also, these Kraken crossbows are just sniper dead shot. Their first shot hits the dragon. I mean, no timidity in the range, no misses, and then they just pincushion it. They shoot like 10 to 15 one or two which I think do miss at this point, but most of which strike this dragon. There's no question this dragon is dead. And then on top of that, crashes into the ocean, sinks beneath the waves. So even if it did somehow magically survive that many of these giant crossbow spear-length shafts, drowns now, which I am sure pleases the Ironborn's drowned god that they worship. She then charges them. They launch the same volley at her, and miss completely. Now, granted, slightly smaller profile because instead of hitting her along her broadside, she is pointed at them. But still, I mean, they hit the first dragon first try, no range finding required, and yet completely miss her. It's the plot armor from the last episode that many people don't like. I mean, I'm not someone who thinks that every episode you have to have an important character die, but at the same time, then don't put the character into that kind of a situation where it's so unlikely they would survive. That's kind of the issue there. Now, afterwards, the crossbows are turned upon the fleet, and this I felt was a bit unrealistic. I can imagine these things being quite deadly. They treat them like they're cannonballs, though. These crossbows just tear the fleet to shreds, and apparently have some kind of auto-load feature, too, because, I mean, they just keep firing and firing. Here, Daenerys' advisor, whose name I can never keep straight, but her original female advisor before the Spider and Tyrion and such joined, she gets captured. Apparently only she gets captured. She's on the same boat as everyone else. They all make it to shore, but suddenly next time we see her, she's in chains in the Red Keep at King's Landing. No explanation, no transition, she was captured, magically off screen. In fact, we don't even see any of the Iron Fleet ships leave that little harbor. So how they captured her, I've got no idea, neither does anybody else. So after that, we then have the parlay, where Daenerys gives Cersei the chance to surrender, and of course Cersei demands her surrender. I mean, this is all under a flag of truce. Some people are upset that Cersei didn't try to wipe them out, but again, it's, you know, they're having a parlay. And if Cersei is confident in her position, she has no particular reason to betray this. And it'd be inconvenient if you wanted to parlay later for some reason. Ideally, I mean, it's a trope that the evil villain always breaks the flag of truce. But to be honest, if you are trying for a more realistic story, like Game of Thrones supposedly is doing, that's not really something you do, because what if you need to have a truce, you know, or parlay later? For whatever reason, even if it's not to surrender. I mean, obviously, they're not going to talk to you at that point. Now, on top of that, there is a dragon actually behind them. Most people don't notice. He's off in the corner, barely seen. Nobody talks about him. He doesn't roar or anything. But actually, the last surviving dragon was also there. A lot of people feel Tyrion was out of character here. He keeps acting like Cersei isn't a monster, which, again, he's her brother. Maybe he's blind to that. Again, he's supposed to be one of the smartest characters in the world of Game of Thrones, so this does seem a little out of character for him to be so dedicated to trying to find the good in his sister. I mean, you'd think he's Luke Skywalker, the pre-Disney Luke Skywalker. And of course, Cersei does is have the Mountain, the huge guy in armor there, cut off the female advisor's head. She shouts something in Esoros, or whatever language she speaks. I think it along the lines, its translation means fire or burn, like burn it to the ground, burn it all, and clearly Daenerys is very upset about it. As obviously she should be. So most likely the next episode is going to be her sacking the city, or attempting to at least. And of course they're all worried that many innocent people will die that live in the city, which unfortunately, especially medieval warfare, is fairly typical. In fact, I think, I mean, while I appreciate them worrying about the innocents, I actually feel it's somewhat unrealistic from a medieval perspective that they would be that worried about it, though. I mean, most people at this sort of time period view what has to be done in war has to be done. Sure, there are limits, but I mean, they're not going to directly sack the civilian cities and such. They're going to go directly for the Red Keep, which Cersei has filled with civilians. I don't know if she honestly thinks that'll keep Daenerys from attacking, if she thinks the soldiers, at least, that will attack her won't be as aggressive, knowing there are civilians in there. Or she's hoping this will ruin Daenerys' reputation, and even if she wins, it'll prevent her from, successfully, peacefully claiming the Iron Throne after. I have no idea. Regardless, the most important, really, conversation that goes down is that Jon does tell his sisters the truth. That he's not their half-brother, that he is, in fact, their cousin. And, of course, swears them to secrecy. Now, Daenerys already didn't want him to tell them. She wanted him to swear secrecy that he wouldn't do this. Sansa immediately breaks it by turning around and telling Tyrion the truth, and makes no attempt to swear him to secrecy, which is good because literally he turns around and tells the spider. So, according to them, at least 8 people now know, which the spider points out means it's not a secret anymore. The truth is out there, and it's just going to spread. And he's already up for betraying Daenerys. He actually wants to put Jon on the throne, and he has a good point. Why Tyrion says that Jon doesn't want the throne, the spider says, well, did you ever stop to think that's the best qualifier to put him on the throne? Great men do not seek greatness, it's thrust upon them argument, which has a lot of merit to it. But he's already setting up to betray her, it seems, which is interesting because earlier during the feast scene, when everyone was paying more attention to Jon, he was the only one who seemed worried about her. And it came off more in that he was loyal to her. And he was disconcerted that he was seeing this happen. But regardless, he seems now in favor of overthrowing her. He's not even in favor of them marrying, which Tyrion does suggest. And Tyrion points out that among the Targaryens, not that unusual. But the spider does counter that Jon was raised among the Northmen, and in the North, it's not normal. And indeed, Jon seems to have a problem with it, as is understandable. Whereas Daenerys does suggest that she's trying to forget about it, and suggests that she would actually be able to ignore it. But regardless, it is interesting to see what's going on. I mean, definitely Grey Worm, the Unsullied commander, and Daenerys are very upset. There's a good chance we'll see one or both of them go kind of berserk in the next episode. We may see a betrayal from either Tyrion and or the spider. And who knows? Again, Jon Snow hasn't arrived yet to the King's Landing, and Daenerys may start her attack prior to that. So we may very well see her sacking the city, burning it to the ground, and Jon Snow shows up and has to attack her, or at least attack her forces to try to stop her. And keep in mind, she does at the moment control the only dragon, which definitely gives her the advantage. That's pretty much the end of my reaction. If you like this content, feel free to subscribe to the channel, check out my other videos. If you would like to support, I should now have a link below where you can do that. Until next time, my friends, thanks for listening.
I've seen attack ships on fire off the shore of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark.